Hi all and welcome along to this session, which is the UWA 2020 Crawley Campus Master Plan. My name is Dominic Marafiotti and I'm the chair for this session. Our presenter will answer any questions at the end of the session, and we invite you to place any questions in the live Q&A tab and not in the discussion area. Any unanswered questions hopefully will get answered at the end when Trevor finds a moment. Our presenter today is Trevor Humphreys. Trevor is a chartered surveyor and has worked in higher education estates in the UK and more recently Australia for over 30 years. He is the Director of Campus Management at the University of Western Australia, and prior to joining UWA, he fulfilled similar roles at the University of Leicester, Surrey and Manchester. Trevor is leading a major change program at UWA to align service delivery and the needs of a highly successful university. He's also leading the development of a new estate strategy and campus master plan, which we'll hear a bit more about. So please welcome Trevor.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have you on the session. We want to just really give you some idea of how we approached the development of our 2020 Crawley Campus Master Plan. We don't want to give you a bit of a cookie cutter run through maybe the traditional approach to master planning. So what we will do is highlight some nuances to the way in which this was approached. What I will say is that this is the culmination of essentially 2 years worth of work of myself, but also a very big and dedicated team that sat behind this, both internal colleagues as well as quite a bit of external capability to support this. So let's go. Didn't work. Let's just make sure we can move on. There we are. Okay. So under the UWA Act, we are required to deliver a master plan every 10 years. And that master plan is required to provide the state government, WA state government, as well as the wider community with how the university intends to plan and develop its estate over the ensuing 10 years, the ensuing decade. UWA's primary focus is, of course, at the Crawley campus. But what we did this time is we felt the need to look beyond the Crawley campus. All previous master plans focused on Crawley, but actually our intention was to look beyond the Crawley campus at all of our estate. That led to this diagram. And what we demonstrate on this diagram is simply the scale, which I think surprised all of us, the scale of our property ownership, occupation, and obviously the cost associated with that estate. So the stats speak for themselves. We have a significant estate, predominantly focused on Crawley and the QE2 Medical Centre campus just to the north of the Crawley campus in Perth, but also dotted all around the Western Australian landscape, as it were. And it's important for us to understand the overall asset, what we are managing, what we are developing, what we are operating, because that is a really important factor in thinking about your future development. The approach we took was one whereby before we sort of embarked on the development of the master plan, what we wanted to do was deliver an estate strategy. And that was the work that really took place through 2018 and into 2019. What we did, we looked internationally at how other universities have responded to the changing and challenging environment. Now, bear in mind that this is before COVID. So we were looking at learning trends, focus on student needs, how we would fund development, and so on. And really reflecting on the fact that the 2010 master plan was in a very different environment to that which we found ourselves in 2018, 2019. And of course, we know that has emerged quite significantly since. What we did, we collected essential comparative data about the sector, and we were focused internationally as much as domestically about our estate, the condition, the size of the estate, its utilization, all of those good indicators around how we are using, occupying, utilizing our estate, how we are investing in that estate over the previous period. We also needed to reference the university's growth plan over the future period, probably 5 to 10 year plan. And this really needed to inform our thinking about the size of that estate that we needed. The outcome was that we settled on from that, the work that we looked at internationally was we settled on what were essentially 5 values that would help inform our future thinking on our campus. And those values were that what epitomized the University Crawley campus was that it is a public university, it is a connected university. We like to think that it is a beautiful campus, that it is functional, i.e. it meets the needs of its users, and that it is safe. But what we also identified is the need to focus on our fantastic location, the built and natural environment, but also actually the heritage of the site prior to UWA's presence on the land. And the completion of the estate strategy, we then commenced the development of the master plan. And that was really early last year, early 2020. What I want to talk about today is really just some of the nuances, the difference in our approach that resulted in the outcome of our master plan. At its highest level, the estate strategy defined the challenge for UWA. Bear in mind all of that data collection, all of that international and national review of university education estates. The university needs to invest in its physical assets, its existing physical assets in the Crawley campus, and realise the value of its surplus asset holdings, so it can fund those priority activities, including capital investment, and of course reduce operational costs. So there was a big focus here on consolidation, rejuvenation, and development, which I'll talk to in a second. But the consequence of this is that we actually identified a number of other land assets, as I identified at the outset of the presentation, as being non-core, and therefore thinking about how we use them in a very different way. But the master plan concept had 3 primary areas of focus. Rejuvenation of our existing estate, driven via consolidation. How our future student growth plan can be accommodated between the Crawley and the QE2 Medical Centre campus without the additional need for the need for additional space in the medium term, certainly. So rejuvenation of our existing estate is the primary focus. Refurbishment, improvement in utilisation, the contemporisation of that estate to meet student needs, dealing with compliance and condition, of course. But most importantly, consolidation, bringing all of that peripheral activity to the Crawley campus, and thereby releasing other land assets for redevelopment and or divestment. Secondly, activation. Now, again, I will stress this is pre-COVID, but we had and did identify at the time that we needed to re-energize the Crawley campus for our, particularly focused on our students, but also for our staff and the wider community. This, of course, became even more important and evident following COVID. Of course, WA has not suffered the same issues that Eastern States universities have suffered in terms of lockdowns, but nonetheless, the lockdowns that we did have through the course of last year and earlier this year have caused sort of students to learn and study much more online, and many staff continue to work from home. So that process of activation, a strategy for how we activate the campus, is actually even more important than it was. And that includes things such as place shaping. Where is the important locations that students will come and where they will stay, either informally or informally, and I will talk a little bit more about that later. And then the final concept is that of development. And what we have identified with the Crawley campus is that there are 3 primary development sites that can be used for strategically driven opportunities at scale if required. And they happen to be at the north, in the middle, and at the south of the campus. There are other locations, but they are the 3 primary focus for development into the future as necessary. These concepts really helped us shape our thinking somewhat differently, as the focus is not about expansion, building shiny new buildings. It's more about the protection and enhancement of both the built and the natural environment on the Crawley campus. Let's talk about student experience, because ultimately for all of us, it has to be a primary focus. What we needed to understand is, where is the campus heart? Does it exist? If it does, is it sufficient and adequate to meet our current and future student needs? So what matters to students in that campus heart? What facilities do they need? Where is that campus beating heart? How do students navigate through to that location and through the campus? Is the campus and that student-focused area safe? Where do they learn? Where do students socialize? And where do they live? And where do they do other things such as exercise and so on? Another important factor from a student perspective, and increasingly important from a Crawley campus location perspective, is how they travel here. Do they come by public transport? Drive? As you will hear from the accent, I'm from the UK, where the majority of universities do not have any student parking. It came as a complete surprise to me to see the extent to which we provide parking for students in Australian universities. I understand the reasons why, but it's a very different dynamic to that which I've been used to. And of course, finally, absolutely fundamental to students is the good Wi-Fi on campus. And interestingly, at UWA, it's not brilliant. So the student was at the heart of all of our thinking. Secondly was the landscape. For those who've visited or have taken time to look at some of the images of the Crawley campus, it is a fantastic environment. It's a parkland setting, but it's really set in what is quite a natural environment, adjacent to the Swan River, and it is loved and cherished for many of those reasons. But that focus on the natural environment and how it is used by students, by staff, and by the wider community, it is a very porous campus. And so we see the community taking advantage of this campus quite extensively, and therefore being heavily invested in it, as our students and our staff are. So how do we protect that natural landscape environment and enhance it for the benefit of all of those users? Those are the obvious things through the long-term landscape strategy and the biodiversity strategy. They're really important. But we were also thinking beyond that, and thinking beyond that in terms of the heritage of the site before the university ever landed on this site. We also look in more practical things around the use of endemic species, long-term replacement of imported species, and how, for example, we use water to maintain this estate. All of those are tensions for us into the future. Finally, in terms of the thinking about the estate, the campus heritage. So we know that the built heritage of the university estate is fantastic. It is beautiful, it's photogenic, and it's a great asset to the university. But it's only been here for approximately 100 years. And before that, what we need to understand is, what were the cultural narratives inherent on the land, adjacent to the Swan River, that essentially go back thousands of years. So what was a really emerging thinking for us was how we brought to bear on our future campus master plan the approach around the previous use of this land, and therefore considering the caring for country and place shaping that references previous use, and how that can focus on our environmental and biodiverse sensitive urban design thinking. So what we wanted to do was really connect a learning on country experience through supporting the outcomes that fully acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar values and narratives. Before we get into that, just in terms of the thinking on the master plan, at its heart is the Crawley master plan concept. But these layers all fed into the outcome. I've talked about the external and internal environments work that we did through the estate strategy, but what we have wrapped around that concept is our environmental strategy, sustainability strategy, and specifically that Crawley cultural heritage mapping through the Whadjuk Noongar stories, lore, and values. So this diagram indicates that there are the standard components to the master plan, the transport plan, the landscape plan, and so on. However, new to us, new to UWA, was the concept of cultural heritage mapping that formalizes the cultural significance of the land the campus is built on. This land, which is deeply entrenched in the culture of the Whadjuk Noongar people. I really want to briefly outline this journey that we took that really greatly informed the outcomes of our master plan. So this was the process of cultural heritage mapping that began with really thinking about how we would engage with the Whadjuk Noongar people who are so familiar with this land. And the way in which we took this on was the development of an artistic interpretation of the shared knowledge and the stories of the literary reviews and Noongar engagement that took place. This was to inform how the university acknowledges foremost that this is a place of learning on country and acknowledges that the European settlement on this land is only a small part of the history of this land. So what we did was we worked with Noongar elders, and they were brought in to tell the stories, to develop this living visual map of the university's the land and the cultural heritage of this land. And it was a fantastic exercise that essentially emerged with the outcome being this painting. So what you see, this diagram here, is actually a painting. It's about 3 meters by 2 meters, and it's displayed in one of our buildings that was completed by a number of Noongar artists on the basis of the stories that were relayed to them by a number of Noongar elders. And this work was done over a period of approximately a week. And it was just an emerging story that was then relayed into a piece of artwork. Part of this is the development of what we refer to as the Bilia Katarjin, which is effectively the Whadjuk Noongar interpretation of the site plan. And it really is an evolving piece of document, the documentation of the Crawley campus, with the Whadjuk Noongar tradition, knowledge, and culture the primary focus, that we will use to inform and enrich the organizational and spatial planning and visioning of the university into the future. So it becomes a really important key reference point for us for the future. And as a living document, Bilia Katarjin will over time create an overlay of all of the Aboriginal recognition across the entire campus. The Noongar elders were fantastic, and they obviously followed the story of the 6 seasons. And what we ended up with is this emerging documentation that forms the basis of our future reference point for cultural mapping as we develop the campus over the future. So it was led, of course, by the Whadjuk Noongar elders. We facilitated that with a company called UWA to support that work. And you know, for me, as a Pommy coming to Australia and not really understanding the significance of what had happened in Australia, and then seeing how this overlaid what I might have described as more traditional campus master planning that I'd experienced in the United Kingdom, this was a fantastic and enriching experience, both for me, but actually for the wider community of UWA. The outcome here is this Bilia Katarjin that I made reference to earlier. And this is a cultural map of the site with Aboriginal recognition. Includes place shaping. We've identified Aboriginal names for some of our primary pedestrian routes through the campus. Just for reference, we've formulated this in the sort of through 90 degrees. So north is to the right, as it were, if you're wondering how that relates to the previous diagrams. But it's about connections to the river, and it's about creating this Brianna Biddy boulevard along the eastern side of the campus, starting at the Guild Village, which is the commencement of the heart of the campus, as I mentioned earlier, running through the primary areas of teaching and learning for students, then running up to the north to the more ceremonial end of the Crawley campus. But absolutely, it's about the recognition and working with the Whadjuk Noongar elders and others to really overlay what is the European settlement with some thinking around Aboriginal heritage. How that then relates to the quarter vision for the campus. So we essentially divided the campus into 4 quarters. The village quarter is the primary student focused quarter. And what we want to see here is greater density and diversity to accommodate the next decade of student growth. And we want to see how, with that Indigenous overlay, we can encourage the place shaping along the eastern edge and reconnect the campus to the river, because it has inevitably and sadly become somewhat disconnected. We see this as a primary student destination, the physical heart of the Crawley campus, accommodating the majority of the student teaching and learning facilities and student activity. This is where, through a process of activation and placemaking, we will bring students to the heart to study, to socialize, to communicate, and so on. This is our primary focus over the next 5 to 10 years. Another quarter that we should focus on is the cultural quarter, which is the northeastern section of the campus. Again, this is the public gateway into the university. And of course, what this diagram indicates is our adjacency to the river and our adjacency to the primary transport routes. So thinking about how we bring students and staff to the campus, we have identified that this is the main hub for any key transport, mass rapid transport solutions that might ensue over future years. But we really see this as the ceremonial, the civic part of the campus. And comments have been made by students over time that this is really where we see students graduating. This is the photogenic end of the campus, not the heart of the beating heart of the campus from a student perspective. But of course, equally important from a civic and a ceremonial perspective. And of course, the primary gateway to the Crawley campus. The southern quarter, again, a really interesting dynamic here, very different in its feel to the northern end of the campus, adjacent to Pelican Point and the river. And it really ensures those strong physical and spiritual links to the land of the Whadjuk Noongar people. This quarter will provide us with long-term development and expansion opportunities for the University Crawley campus. And original swampy and wetland areas close to Pelican Point Reserve make up some of this land. And so we see this as really a great focus on the future biodiversity and environmental sustainability credentials of the campus. We look, you can see this idea of this urban forest. We look to see how we can create this connection from the river across to the west side of the campus through an urban forest. So again, this is just highlighting how we're thinking about this in a somewhat different way. It's not just about new blingy buildings on the campus that really are statements of intent for the university in terms of student recruitment and so on. Finally, what we're trying to do here is take a 21st century campus approach to this landmark site that has spectacular surrounds, and thinking about how the landscape and the biodiversity and the environmental richness of the campus can really drive great outcomes for our students. So the theme here is really about how we can build on what we have, both in terms of the built estate, but also that landscaped estate, and how that connects back to the cultural heritage of the land prior to the university's occupation of the site. So I think that's just about me done. I'm very happy to take some questions, and Dom, it would be great if you can guide me on some of those as I've been focused on presenting.
I will once we start getting a few more in. So if someone would like to put some questions in, I'm sure there's a few out there. Trevor, thanks for that. Thanks for taking us through that journey through the heritage, the cultural heritage part, but also in the earlier section of your discussion, you talked about the student, and I'm just wondering how you engage with students to get their feedback about what was important to them, and
yeah, great question, Don. We undertook a very extensive consultation process with our community, and that included with the students. And we used Samantha Hall, Dr. Samantha Hall, who, interestingly enough, was featured in Campus Morning Mail this week. She's a bit of an expert on what matters from a space perspective, and she engaged over an extended period with the student community. In fact, it went as far as to include video diaries. So she engaged with students and asked them to keep a video diary of the experiences of the campus, as well as much more informal, the post-it notes posted in the student guild for people to put comments about their experiences on the campus. That culminated in a really great report about the student experience on the campus that really did frame our thinking around that campus activation, the campus experience around feeling safe, the walking between different locations on the campus, the trip to the campus, and so on and so forth. So it was a really fantastic piece of work that Sam led for us that will continue to inform our investment decisions over the next few years, frankly.
Right, thanks for that. I think you've provided a great overview, and for that, the people have been watching it, being so enthralled with it. There's been no questions. You obviously answered them all as you've gone through. So on that, I'd like to thank you, and I'm sure if anyone's got any questions, they know where to find you at UWA, and I'll send you an email to ask any details about that. But thank you very much for your presentation today. Enjoying the conference, and on that note, we'll end this session and leave you to get back to going on. Well, hang on, there's a fantastic site survey above sea level rising flooding components in the built plan. Yeah, it is. Thank you, David. It's hit some great feedback that's happening in there too. So thanks again, Trevor.
Thank you.
Everyone, if you want to go jump into the timeline, there's a couple of sessions left to go for the conference. I hope you've all been enjoying it, and we'll see you all soon. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks everyone.